Hello everybody and welcome. This is the birth of a new dimension. I recognize that intro is a little bit different than what you're used to, and I'm changing things up a little bit because at this point I am heading into pure abstraction, and that's where my interest really lies. I know I've been on the radio for a long time doing what I jokingly refer to as the flapping of my moving mouth parts, and now what I would also like to do is start to integrate some of the more abstract forms of expression that I have of the truth that I, contain inside of me. So prepare for more of that. On Birth of a New Dimension, if you're new to this show, what I speak about is this burgeoning new form of reality where we have combined together the formerly divergent realms of spirit and matter. And spirit can also be defined as pure energy or pure consciousness or the non-physical. So this is a new experience of matter where we have the non-physical and the physical seamlessly integrated. So the tool or the modality that makes this new experience of matter possible is an oscillation or a dance maneuver that I invented and I named the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And you can see an example of Flying Rainbow Lasagna on the banner of this show. That's what that shape is. You can check out my website, flyingrainbowlasagna.com. You can check out any of my animations and pretty much all of my artwork. It all is a reflection of this basic idea or this basic concept that by doing this oscillation or vibrating maneuver, we can bring together formerly divergent realms. And in this case, the formerly divergent realms are the realms of the purely non-physical, the purely abstract, and the realm of what is manifested as matter and what we interpret with our five physical, sensory senses. So the whole idea is this is not merely an abstraction. It's not merely the flapping of my moving mouth parts or, whatever, speaking about airy-fairy ideals on the radio every week. This is a real change or transformation or expansion of our experience of being embodied, using matter or experiencing light that is slowed down to physicality, and also our experience of time and how we express our consciousness across time. So a lot of this also has to do with the inner, formerly quote-unquote inner, realm of thoughts and ideas and dreams and imagination, which humanity up until this point has greatly devalued and greatly condescended to. And humanity has instead overvalued the externally manifested physical realm as being more real than the inner realm of emotion and thought and dream. And what we're doing now is having an instantaneous integration or partnership, like dance partnership between these two different states, between, physicality and non-physicality, or between matter and energy. So no longer are these two things poised in dualistic opposition. Now they are integrated like the way that a band or a symphony is integrated together. So this is also all about harmonics. So for a very long time, I've been speaking about these intellectual ideas. However, at the same time, I do these overtones singing, and also I have an instrument that produces overtones. So I was working with that a little bit today, and I'm really, I feel like I have expressed a lot in this, I call it hacked operating system that is known as the human language. There's a limit, I feel, to what we can get across to one another with words, and that's intentional. Like that's what that whole myth of the Tower of Babel is. The idea that language has intentionally distorted and limited or constrained our ability to express ourselves to one another, and that if we want to really have these profound, connections and sharing of ideas, we got to somehow jump up and over these language barriers. And so telepathy is like the real way to slice this Gordian knot. what you do is cultivate your higher faculties, get together all of the energy that you need to, I call it like book time on the inner telescope. And with your inner telescope, you can literally look at anything, learn about anything, or speak to anyone and hear back from anyone who has ever lived at any time, anywhere. Now, the challenge is, of course, we're dealing with synthetic telepathy, which is a different program that is running at the same time as natural telepathy. So I'm a natural telepath, just like I advocate for people not to have any kind of like cosmetic augmentation of their body. I'm like, no. What you got with your birthday suit is good enough. Like that is, you are worthy. You have enough. You have everything that you needed when you came here. You don't have to have like extra anything implanted in you. So I feel that way about the physical appearance and function of the body, and also about our mentation and our ability to use consciousness to navigate the time field. Brief pause. So on the topic of using our consciousness to navigate the time field, today's topic is focused on how reason and logic, there are inherent flaws within the human operating system known as the human mind, and its expression through what is known as reason and logic, and that these are not appropriate tools to use to navigate the time field. When I talk about the time field, it's not, again, an abstraction, like a non-existent imaginary thing. It is actually a highly existent imaginary thing, and it's like a landscape. So when I'm talking about the time field, I'm talking about an actual place that can be perceived, and it looks like a three-dimensional embroidery that also moves and changes and shifts. And this is an embroidery that is made out of possibilities and probabilities. And we are not separate from this embroidery. We are absolutely an integral part of it. And our own journey through time is part of what makes the embroidery happen. And I've spoken about satanic or, dark technology, dark magic that confuses and distorts the natural warp and weft of this woven time field, and about how that's extremely disturbing. It creates perturbations in the time field, and how that prevents the clear expression of this, I would call it, mathematical perfection. Like when we're looking at this time field, it is highly mathematical, even though it's not necessarily expressed in Arabic numerals or the type of equations that you would see written in a math textbook from this time and place. It's a different type of math. So I describe it as the type of math that, let's say, an athlete uses in order to calculate how fast you're running down the court, where are the other players, how high do you have to jump in order to shoot the ball in order to make the basket. So it's a highly complex set of calculations that are done in the moment, and they're done by immersion, like being immersed in the activity, being immersed in, like using the sport example, being immersed in the game, even though this is not a game. It's like very serious. And because it's life and death. It's life and death, and it's very real suffering. So I don't mean to merely make it seem like a distant abstraction. The risk is very real. The suffering is very real. So in order to navigate the time field, and when I talk about that, when I use that phrase, what I mean is move through time effectively, not merely, like a ping pong ball, like bouncing back and forth between various barriers and just being, like tossed and turned hither, thither, and yon. I'm not talking about that, uncontrolled type of trajectory tumbling through time. I'm really talking about having a coherent, focused journey through time, which is really what our birthright is. It's the intention for what we were supposed to be able to experience while being embedded in matter. The idea that we are non-physical consciousness in a physical, container of matter, and the container is your body, but the container is also all the plants and animals that you eat, and everything that's on the planet that you're living on, and everything that's not on the planet that you're living on. Like, it's a vast, very large array that helps you to be alive in the physical. And I also call that the symphony of life. So moving through time successfully and not dying is how you play this game. It's how you get to the end of the basketball court and get your ball to go in the basket. It's how you get points. It's how you stay alive and continue to thrive and have an eternal experience. Like, continuing to move through time. That's how you be immortal, by not dying, continuing to move through time. And you do that by playing the right music. And the music is not just notes with your voice, but it's also patterns of, well, it's behavior patterns, thought patterns, and all of those are really projections and expressions of DNA dance patterns. So embodying these patterns that I paint, and really check out my artwork, I'm not merely doing self promotion here and saying this. I make these paintings for a reason. It's literally a landscape, it's a viewpoint, it's something that you can see and perceive. I see it and I perceive it, and I translate it into actual physical colors that you can see painted on a thing that's hanging on a wall. I do it for a reason. Like, these aren't arbitrary patterns. These aren't just like, oh, I woke up one day and just decided to slap this and this together. They all fit together, and it's part of a language or whatever, a pattern, a code. I didn't invent it. I perceive it, and I'm like, it's like an operating system that is running in the much, much larger aspect of the cosmos. Or I can say, as Aurora, I didn't invent it, but if I dilate my personality to include, the divine creator, then yes, of course, I as the divine creator created it. And don't mistake me for a megalomaniac. What I'm doing here is saying, like, we are all this divine creator that has been refracted into many different physical containers, and that we're on this journey of remembering, hey, wait a minute, I'm actually the divine down here in a physical container. And that divine, or we could even call it like a meta persona, meta meaning overarching. It's the entity that lives at the galactic level, at the level of stars being neurons, that were inside of this great brain, and our little tiny human bodies would be analogous to like little tiny atoms or molecules or something, within one cell structure of one part of a very giant brain. However, that does not, I don't tell you that in order to minimize what we are doing here or pretend like we're insignificant. What's happening on Earth right now is highly significant, because we can also say that this brain has not been harmonious for a very long time. It's had a pathogenic infection, and that pathogenic infection has affected or infected many different planets, many different places where life has blossomed, and Earth is one of its most recent victims. So about 10 or 20,000 years ago, humanity underwent a genetic degradation that brought us from being purely telepathic light eaters into being denser beings that have to eat physical matter and can no longer communicate just on a bridge of light or telepathy between minds. And that's why we had to invent the flapping of the moving mouth parts, and it's a highly inefficient and highly distortive way of sharing information. But it's what we've been doing for a while, and if you don't download this human language operating system, you pretty much can't share your ideas that are inside of your brain with everyone that is quote unquote outside of your brain. So that's why I've had to download and use this particular software, even though I know that it's not that perfect. So mostly we come here as little infants. We start to download this software that is about language and communication, because at a certain point you have to be able to communicate, hey, I'm hungry, or hey, I got poop in my pants. And then you also download this human operating system, OS human. And I'm not a transhumanist. I don't use any of this language in order to try to equate us as being software components. But I use this because it's good, analogy for how to get these ideas across. That this OS, this operating system of the human mind, is inherently flawed. Just like when you download stuff from Windows, Windows from Microsoft, it makes it possible for Microsoft to have a nice backdoor into your system. Like whatever if they want to read your stuff, they want to, control your cursor or what pages you look at, they could technically do that. And this is the same as understanding that the human mind did not originate with humanity. The very same beings, the pathogenic infection that removed the capacity to be purely telepathic and used the higher faculties, implanted this distorted, quote unquote, human mind, but it's not actually human. It actually comes from these horrible rapist oppressors. And the whole point is, if you had your higher faculties, I wouldn't have to explain any of this. You would see all of this and understand it like I'm snapping my fingers, the snap of an instant. You'd see it all, just like the same way you can look at my painting and be like, look, I'm seeing a giant painting and there's a bunch of rainbows there and that part's blue and that part's purple. Like you can see it very clearly. So it's only because humanity has been degraded that humanity has not been able to understand that it has been oppressed or suppressed and who has done it and why is this going on. So it's taken very many, I'm not the only one, very many people coming here using the flapping of the moving mouth parts and other different types of, ways of sharing information and teaching in order to say, hey, this is what's going on. And we're now at this point where there's mass understanding or acknowledgement of this mind state of being diminished and the necessity of rectifying the situation. And of course, my contribution is this shape called the flying rainbow lasagna that allows everyone to reweave their genetic code and reactivate their higher faculties. This is what I want, even more than ice cream, the best things in the world. This is what I want for everyone. Reactivate your higher faculties, be able to see clearly with pure insight. That if everybody could actually do that, we would have such a profoundly transformed and improved world that it would literally be considered, a utopia, a perfect society. Because all of the things that are happening that are unfair and unjust and about rape and murder and torture and torment, all of these things are able to happen because of the blinded aspect of humanity, that we're supposed to have an eye of insight, that is the higher eye that allows us to navigate the time field effectively, as opposed to using the hacked human operating system known as logic and reason to reason one's way through the time field. So, I get all of my ideas from the stellar network when I'm out ingesting sunlight, like by doing sun gazing or, walking around or being in the sun. So I've been getting these ideas for a long time, and I've had a lot of disruption in my life. We had a mega fire in my area, so it's been a long time of me getting back to the creative output of being able to share ideas effectively. So yeah, it's been gestating inside of me, and I've understood that I have to describe how to effectively navigate the time field as opposed to using logic and reason. So the basic teaching to humanity from, the regular social structure and the regular economic and religious structure is that your mind is special, your mind is what elevates you above a mere brutish animal, and that the way that you're supposed to go through your day is by thinking. You're supposed to think like, okay, first I need to do this, then I need to do this, then I need to go here, then I need to do this. And the analogy that I use is my studio. I'm in my studio right now, and it's not that much of a mess. Sometimes it's kind of a mess. Like sometimes there's a chair over there and lamps over there and all sorts of, projects all strewn about the floor. And then there's a sweater on the floor over there. There's the dog toy. There's all these different things. So let's say that there's no light in the room, or that your eyes are closed, or that you can't see, or you're blind. What is the way to navigate across this area of my floor without bumping into things and, stabbing yourself with sharp things? So, humans are taught that you can't see moving forward through time. That's literally what's truthful. Everybody's blinded. You don't know what's coming in the future. So that the way to navigate across this giant obstacle field is to use reason. So that would be like if you stood at the threshold of my door and you said, well, I'm going to reason out who lives here, what might be going on in this room, why a person might put a sweater on the floor, or why they might put a particular, set of rolling shelves in this area. Why would these floor obstacles be configured in the way they are? Maybe even do a lot of projection and personification about the person that owns the room. Like, oh, look, they've left their sweater on the floor. That must mean this. Or, oh, look, they've put this piece of furniture in this position. That must mean this. That's using logic and drawing all of these inferences, saying, if I take, how about this? Last time I was here, I took 2 steps forward, then I took 2 steps to the left, and then I took 5 steps forward. So now, logically, I should, either do the same thing or do a different thing based upon all of these inferences that I've drawn. And you're understanding the way that I'm describing this, hopefully. This is a very clunky and inefficient and even risky or dangerous way to try to simply walk across a room, that's filled with obstacles, because you don't really know why a person puts things in the room. And, I might have just dumped my sweater on the floor because I was busy doing something else. I didn't necessarily put it there intentionally. Like, there are all of these things that are, like I said, those rational inferences that are made in order to justify or explain the configuration of possibilities and events. And it's highly suspect. There's so much possibility for distortion and error, and it's so presumptive, and there's no way to test it out, to say, oh, this is definitely like this because of this. Like, there's absolutely no way to know that for certain. So humanity has been not only flying blind, but using a very distorted form of GPS to try to navigate the time field, where humanity is trying to reason its way through time and think, oh, the rational thing to do is to do blah, 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 and then go here and then do this. I think you're starting to understand, and I think that everybody can think of or recognize very clear examples in their own lives of how they attempt to use reason to do what they need to do at each moment. And reason is not necessarily the most efficient way. So, even though a person standing at the threshold of my studio when it's all messy, they might be able to kind of reason their way across and be like, okay, 90% of the time there's nothing over here. So it's, I have a good chance that I could step over here and not step on anything. Or, 85% of previous people have been able to step over here with nothing being here. You can think about all these different things, but that might be the one day that I, left my sweater on that spot, or I might have rearranged the furniture. I might have done anything. So none of these are really effective ways, but it's what humans have used to kind of hobble through life. Now let me contrast that with actually turning on the lights, or actually opening your eyes, or actually being not visually impaired and being able to see and perceive. And we see and perceive on a higher dimensional level with our eye of insight. It's how you see through time. And humanity up until this point has thought seeing through time, that's only for very special people. If you can see through time, I'll pay you money and you can tell me my future. That's not very effective. That's like I'm going to pay someone else to digest my food for me. That doesn't actually work. Or you're going to pay someone else to lift weights for you, and you're not going to get the muscles. They're going to get the muscles. So each one of us has to cultivate our own higher perception in order to be able to see through time, because you can't get anyone else to do it for you. And then when you can actually see, it's like, oh, we've turned on the lights. Now you can actually see. Is there a sweater there? Is there not a sweater there? Can I walk across over here? Can I not walk across over here? And you're not using this highly flawed and presumptive way of trying to figure out what the configuration of obstacles is or is going to be. So when I use that example of an athlete is in the moment completely, really transcending the use of the implanted mind. The athlete is really carrying so many calculations at once that it's not possible to have an internal dialogue. The athlete doesn't think, dribble, dribble, bounce, bounce, move your left toe, move your right toe, move your shoulder, move your head, keep your spine erect. You don't think that when you're doing it, you're in it. Or I've never played basketball, I'm telling you. That's why these sports analogies are so, formal, whatever. They're not the most natural to me, but I'm trying to think of how I can describe this to other people. But whatever is your deal, I mostly do art and music. So for me, when I'm submerged in the moment and when I'm doing my blissful way of moving through time, no one has to tell me, move my pinky, press this part of the piano, or, pick up my pencil, get the red paint, get the green paint. I don't have to verbally think these thoughts. It all simply flows. So I want to give everybody credit that everybody here is an incredibly advanced super calculator. That the combination of your physical body and your emotions and your spiritual energy and your consciousness or your ability to perceive and, what we would call your soul or your trajectory through time, that all of those are like numbers or variables that are adding up to different combinations of outcomes. And each one of us moving through the time field is like a calculator. This plus this plus this plus this plus this equals this. And that is what we are doing. So again, it's not something that's effective to do through reason, where you think if you want to work your way backwards in an equation, after the equals sign, we want to have super happy, fun abundance, right? So we think I need to add together my education, go to a good college, plus getting a good job, plus my 401k and retirement equals having a super fun retirement life, And that is the reasonable way of moving through the time field. However, that is not effective if all of the obstacles have been rearranged in the room of time. And I'm telling everyone, all of the obstacles have been rearranged in the room of time. The idea of moving through time by, getting your formal education and then working at one job for one particular, corporate, overlord is the word I'm trying to come up with, for 45 years until you retire and live on your pension is at best a narrative structure that would have applied, almost 100 years ago. Not something that applies to the current configuration of society, economic structure, the way that corporate structure is created, the way that abundance and money flows. None of those approaches are effective anymore. So in this athletic expression, in this game that we're playing, the landscape always changes. I got a truck going by outside, sorry about that. The landscape is ever changing, and the goal, or this, not necessarily what the goal is, because I think everybody's goal is health and happiness and vitality and longevity, but the location of the goal is always changing. Like, the goal might have been located, somewhere amidst, having a corporate job and corporate structure many decades ago. That might have been how you get to that goal. But now everything has changed and shifted, so it is necessary to seek that goal in a different place. If you want to have the capacity to, direct your own life and choose what you do in terms of your activities every day, because when people talk about slavery, what they're saying is they don't get to choose their activities every day. It's a very constrained and uncomfortable existence. And once again, I'm just rearranging my chair here. Once again, that is the rational implanted mind that says this is the way to freedom, that slavery is the path to freedom. It's totally cognitive dissonance. It doesn't make any sense. It's saying that the way to be free is first to get a job or have a boss or have someone else tell you what to do, which is slavery. And then you get paid for doing something for someone else. And then if you get paid enough, then no one else gets to tell you what to do anymore. And that's the idea. It's totally, just doesn't make sense. It's like saying if you want to drive north, drive south. No, if you want to drive north, drive north. If you want to go to a state of total freedom, go to a state of total freedom. You don't say, first I'm going to work 45 years in this state that is not considered freedom in order to get to a state of total freedom. So I think we're starting to understand this. How do you navigate the time field effectively? By cultivating your higher faculties and actually being able to perceive on a higher dimensional level. So how do you cultivate your higher faculties? A big part of it is I'm making like a cutting motion with my hand. Cutting the circuits that are these implanted, hacked operating systems, that the human mind and the verbalized mind. So there's tons of schools of meditation, different techniques for doing this. You can do things, truck go by outside. You can do things like self-observation. You can do things like watching thoughts float by, like each one is on a cloud. You can do repetition, which is kind of overload. It's like if you smell something really strong and then you can't smell afterwards because your nose gets overloaded, you can overload your mind. And so you get a mantra. You just repeat your mantra over and over and over, and it overloads your mind so that you then have a little bit of breathing space where your mind is not always talking. The whole idea is your speaking mind is an implanted mind. And I, ironically, am using words to communicate this to you. If you could be in my studio, I really feel at this point like I wouldn't have to even talk. And that's the whole idea. I'm moving into this part experience of my life because I've spent many years being on the radio, talking about this stuff, doing tons of videos, doing a lot of description of it. Now I'm moving much more into the realm of pure experience. So, and every day I do this dance that is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And I do these brief pauses to save my work. The Flying Rainbow Lasagna is an abstract dance. It's an abstract state of being where I literally, for a little while, each day, transcend the limitations of my ego. Now, Aurora is a good ego. Like, I'm totally not into self-hatred, and I encourage everyone to love and accept themselves. And I'm like, oh, I love Aurora. Aurora is wonderful. It's like, I like being this person. I like wearing this sweater. I like, having a dog. I like my paintings. But this is a limitation, like being defined by only the boundary structure of who this person is slightly a limitation. So in order to be unlimited and completely free and unconstrained in the expression of this dance, I let go of those boundaries and I identify with not merely this body and not merely this trajectory through time, but lots of different molecules, molecular structures, energetic structures, consciousness that is flowing from deep antiquity, and that consciousness that will eventually head towards what we call, the far distant future. I connect with consciousness that is in the form of plants and animals and tiny microbes all around me. I dilate my identity to include basically the entire symphony of life. And then I play with all of these other wonderful living musicians. So when I do that, It's not, like, again, you don't have to kill your ego, but to move beyond the limitations of the ego also means that you reprioritize what you want and what you think is the most important. It's not only about what you need as an individual, because you would never want to only improve your own existence at the expense of someone else. So if it's like, I could have a wonderful, fantastic, fulfilled life, but oops, that palm tree outside my window has got to die. Like, that would not be an effective solution. Or any form of genocide or ethnic cleansing or any of these things that people think about. I'm totally not an advocate for any of those quote-unquote solutions. So the real challenge is joining this cosmic band, being part of this larger symphony, harmonic structure of consciousness, and recognizing that everything needs to thrive. So that also means the individual cells of your body all need to thrive, and the cells that are outside of your body need to thrive too. Now, I know somebody out there is going to say, but Aurora, what about pathogens? Don't pathogens have a right to thrive too? It's like parasites' rights, parasites' rights. I'm imagining some kind of like march in the streets with people holding little signs and being like, don't kill, the bugs, don't kill the pathogenic microbes. But we all know in our bodies that you're supposed to have some cells that are your own cells in your body that serve the overarching persona of you. And they are cells that are part of the initial explosion of consciousness that was called conception. And then there are some cells that are pathogenic invaders. But they weren't there as part of that original expansion of consciousness at conception of the beginning of life of your body. They came along sometime later. They're like, oh, hey, nice body. I'd like to have some of that. And they're like, oh, let me into your cells. Let me do this and this. No, now you serve me. I want this from you. And that's pathogenic. And the truth is, no, they don't get to have pathogenic rights. No parasites' rights, because they're not actually supposed to be there. That's the whole point. That part of that logic and flawed logic, and instead of reason, let's call it unreason. Because it's a flawed structure when people start to put it into anthropomorphic linguistic interpretation. If you look at it just as the pure math, you understand that there are some consciousnesses that are supposed to be in existence and some consciousnesses or characteristics that are not actually supposed to be in the time field. And what we're experiencing right now on this planet is a refinement of consciousness to the point that the beings that aren't supposed to be here can't be here anymore. This is like a body that is undergoing profound healing. And if there are any invaders, any pathogens, any viruses or microbes that don't belong here, and once again, there are beneficial microbes. Like you can have your skin covered with lactobacillus and it's actually good for your skin. Or you can have all these wonderful probiotic gut bacteria that help you digest your food. Those are latecomers to the party, but they're actually working together with your body. As opposed to, like staphylococcus, you get a staph infection. That's because that's an unwelcome visitor. So here on our planet, we have some unwelcome visitors. We have some cells or aspects or characteristics of personality that are supposed to be here. They're part of the original conception of this planet. We have some that are latecomers to the party who are beneficial, like, beneficial skin microorganisms, beneficial gut bacteria, working together with the planet. And we have some personality characteristics that are purely pathogenic. And the amazing thing to me that I really wanted to get across was this idea that just like in a body, you can have cancer cells or pathogenic cells, that the healthy cells actually feed, that they either don't recognize that they're pathogenic cells or they don't have the capacity to say no. And I'm seeing that in human society. There are some people that are, even people is the wrong word, there are some beings who are the focus of attention in human society, that they might be in the media, they might have written a book, or they might be on TV, or they're in some way gathering attention from the rest of human participants. So in this world, if you're new to this world, not everybody is on a screen. Not everybody is seen by many other people. Some people are seen by many, many people, and they achieve notoriety and celebrity and fame. And some people are seen by a moderate amount of people. And there are some people who are hardly seen by any people. So the pathogenic cells in this time and place, they tend to aggrandize themselves and make sure that a lot of people see them. And I mean, I even think that that's part of the motivation for doing that. That if you're an eternal being, you don't have anything to prove. You really don't give two craps about whether someone knows that you can sing really well, or whether they know how perfectly sculpted your behind is, or whether they know, how great your mind is. Like, people who have really achieved this level of virtuosity and self-cultivation have very little to prove. They're like, they know who they are. They know how good they are. I don't know if any of you, if you're ever musicians, if you've ever had the privilege of playing with really good musicians who aren't about their ego. It's like, yeah, they've been to conservatory. They know how good they are. They know how much they can play. And they don't have to prove it to you. Like, they know how well they can play. But then it's the question of, how do you integrate what your, highly cultivated talents and skills are with other people? So I'm talking about what would be considered like yogis and masters and spiritual teachers. There's a whole bunch of really, really amazingly talented, highly cultivated, valuable virtuosos of the mind / body / spirit or energy centers / ego. That they are amazing. They've been, throughout history, there are many people who are here at this time that are at that level of self-development, but very few of them feel the ego motivation to have to be on a screen, make a lot of videos, or even try to transform it into some kind of a merchandise empire. Like, there's some of these teachers, like whatever, I'm not going to insult anybody by talking about Eckhart Tolle. I hardly even know this guy. I hardly even know his work. But I'm like, wow, he's created some whole kind of like empire. Like, they got calendars. Anytime you got someone who's got calendars, it's like, wow, okay, they've marketed their ideas very effectively. I find that person like very unremarkable. It's kind of, I don't understand why they would engender so much focus and so much attention on them, because I definitely feel that there are people who are equally, if not more, astute and virtuosity, or whatever. They're virtuosos of their mind and their ego, and they're not on a stage. They're not on a speaking tour. They don't have book deals. They don't have millions of dollars. They're like just doing their thing and sharing it with the people around them. And they're not necessarily so much about lauding themselves or elevating themselves and saying, hey, everybody, look at me because you should all know about me. And I know because I bring up Eckhart Tolle because someone once told me, like, oh yeah, he used to be a homeless person, and then he had a realization, and then suddenly, like, how did this formerly homeless person get elevated to this point? Like, I really wonder about this. So I'm basically trying to say that there are pathogens of personality characteristics that live in our world, and that those beings are often the ones that get the most energy. And just like in a sick body, the cancer cells take all the energy from the healthy cells, right? And then they grow fatter and fatter. In this sick society that we are moving out of, and we're moving into a state of health, but in the society we used to occupy, these pathogenic personality characteristics get all the attention, get all the focus. So it's not the most highly refined, it's not the most worthy people that are being presented in videos or making workshops or making calendars, that it's a different level of persona that is being expressed here, and that's not right. So you got all these healthy cells that are like, oh, look, that guy's up on a stage. I'm going to listen to him, believe in his ideas, believe that he's even better than me, and I'm going to buy his calendar. And that's like the healthy cells of the body giving their energy to pathogenic cells. And at this point, what I want everyone to do is feel so valued, feel so special themselves that they're like, wait, why in the world would I buy a calendar from that guy? Why is that guy on a stage? I'm absolutely at the same level that guy is. And that's the whole point, that there are, if we talk about in cells, there's cell behavior, that there is some cells behave in a healthy way in terms of their metabolic processes. Some cells do not behave in a healthy way in terms of their metabolic processes. So let's say Eckhart Tolle is making X million number of dollars a year by selling his calendars. But what that means is that all of those dollars are not in circulation amongst the people that are actually doing the work that they're supposed to be doing here in order to support the metabolic health of the time field. That maybe your job is to do healing or make artwork or make jewelry or do any of these jobs that many people, struggle financially if they do those jobs. They're not corporate jobs. And instead of people, getting massages from you or buying your jewelry or, any of the things that you do, getting direct healings from you, they're busy buying that guy's calendar because he's been marketed. So this is the whole pathogenic structure that I'm seeing, that instead of healthy cells having enough money and supporting other healthy cells in the work that is actually supposed to be done on this planet right now, we have pathogens who elevate themselves and say, hey, look at me, I'm so great, I'm better than you, buy my calendar, and that diverts and concentrates resources and attention in the hands of beings who are generally unworthy of it. So if you cultivate your own higher faculties, you do inner silence, cut the power cords to all of those verbalizations and, nonsense logical fallacies, like you can't reason your way across the time field, don't try, don't think. This is the whole point. I've done a lot of talking on the radio, I've done a lot of videos, and I'm always appealing to people's rational mind. And sometimes they ask these really flawed rational questions, and I'm just like, I can't even. I like that human expression. I can't even. I don't know where to even begin to talk about this. It's like asking, why is an onion? Just, it's flawed on the basic level. So at a certain point, we as the band, the giant cosmic band, and I'm including you, my beautiful audience too, we get to just stop having to address all of these silly questions from the rational mind and just play the music. That's the part of the story that we're in right now. So I've been speaking about this on the radio for years, saying we're in the process of birth. The show is called Birth of a New Dimension. We're having labor contractions. We're transforming on a planetary and on a consciousness-based level. We're bringing together the realms of spirit and matter. Talked all about it. We studied music theory, built the instruments, we've got the gig. It's time to play. It is time to play. That means move into a fully abstract expression of your mind. Be as irrational as you need to be. Part of it is feeling, but it's not just intuition. When people say oh, you make your paintings intuitively, it's actually not intuitively at all. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And when people talk about intuition, it's kind of like feeling your way blindly forward, creeping forward with your toes and feeling if there's anything there. To me, that is not what my paintings are like. I know exactly how they're supposed to look and what I'm supposed to do. That's why I like to joke, if my life would be so easy, if all I had to do was make my paintings, if that was, my main source of income and I didn't have any other responsibilities and all I had to do was make these patterns and shapes and colors and show them to people. Oh my goodness, one moment, please. It was a security notification coming up from my little virus block or whatever. I'm like, oh, don't ruin my whole technological thing here. My life would be so easy if I didn't have to do things like learn about virus blockers. I'm not complaining or anything like that, but you know what I'm talking about. It's just like being in the creative flow. In order to even record this radio show, we have to do all these things. We got to put together the computer, the microphone, I got to get the hard drive, I got to plug this thing into this thing, I got to get the headphones, I got to do this, I got to do that. That's a whole lot of administrative and organizational and detail-oriented thinking. And for me, that's a huge challenge, not a chore, but that takes enormous amounts of effort. And then the further I diverge from my natural thought structure, the more effort it takes. So to do certain things oh my goodness, filling out my taxes, that is the most challenging mental structure for me to try to do. It's like if you're used to running at a really fast pace and then someone's like, okay, now I want you to run at 2.5 miles an hour. And it's this is so slow. This is painful. This is glacially slow. That's what it is like when I have to fill out my taxes. It's just a very totally clunky thought structure, and it's so much easier to just flow in the right way. So all of this to say that each one of us should be fully empowered in order to engineer or design our day-to-day, moment-to-moment existence so that we can avoid that clunky thought structure and just fully flow between events. And it doesn't mean that you don't do responsible things. It does mean that you do responsible things in a way that flows very easily. So any of the whatever administrative tasks or chores that I have to do, there's a way to do them so that it becomes less burdensome and flows more easily. But the real challenge is maintaining this abstract state of mind. So the abstract state of mind is pretty much who most people were in infancy, like that first year of life, before the implantation of the human operating system, before becoming verbal with the hacked operating system, app known as language. That is our true mind. And, it's horribly irresponsible for humanity to implant that mind into children and not give them an off button. That's just, torturous. That's totally irresponsible to do that. So everybody has to come up with their own off button. You have to figure out your own way to quiet down the inner mind. And also another part is expectation or racing forward in time, or a sense of anxiety or grasping at the future. That is another aspect of this idea of being responsible and using your mind and reason to move forward through time. So if you're saying, okay, I'm going to use my mind, I'm going to be responsible, I'm more than just a mere brutish animal, I'm going to think about how my year is going to go, and I'm going to think this and try to make this happen by thinking about this. And that is not how you make something happen. Just like when I'm playing at my piano, the way that I play music, it's not like, oh, I'm going to think about the note C. I'm going to think about this song. No, I'm not going to think about anything, actually. I'm actually going to take my finger, put it on the button, and press it and hear the experience. Experience the music, actually hear the note. That is what we're supposed to do in moving through time. So it's been taught to us that it's highly responsible to think about the future and to create some kind of a plan for the future. Like you have to plan your career, you have to plan your year. Maybe some people might even have a 5-year plan. Some people think I should plan my week, I should plan my day. Some people look at me and they're like, Aurora, you are a highly irresponsible artist. Look at you, not working in a cubicle, not planning for the future. You don't have a 401k. You're navigating the time field in a way that is totally irresponsible. And I'm thinking that is the idea of, blindly moving through the time field, trying to think one's way across. I wouldn't say it's irresponsible. I would say it's kind of pathetic. It's kind of sad. Not that I'm pitying anyone, but that is not how you do this effectively. So yeah, what you're supposed to do is you are supposed to have a goal. That's like saying, I had a vision of a painting and then I want to make that painting happen. And then you find what are the things that you need to do along the way in order to make that goal manifest. And then it's like co-creating with the cosmos in order to create that calculation of series of events and behaviors and thoughts and beliefs to bring you to that eventual desired outcome. So for making a painting, it's easy. Okay, I had a vision of a painting. I want to make it look like this. Well, the first thing I do is go to the hardware store, buy the wood, sand it down, build the stretcher, paint it white. All of that is just the prep work. Then I got to figure out, how am I going to measure this? I got to measure this, and this, set up a basic template. Then I got to figure out how I'm going to measure this, and this. And it falls into place very easily. But what I don't have to do is sit down and write a to-do list. Measure a 6-inch circle, measure a 24-inch circle. That is not the way that I do this. Just like when I sit down at the piano, I don't think, to do, play a D flat. Oh, to do, be sure to play this chord. I don't do that. I start playing. So it is a different experience and it is a different approach and it can be highly effective. So now we're going to get to where we are in the time field. The time field has different qualities to it, just like a landscape has different qualities to it. Sometimes you might be walking on relatively level ground, or if you're in a marathon, whatever, you're running on level ground. Sometimes you're running uphill. Sometimes it's very hilly, up, down, up, down. Sometimes it's super difficult and it's rocky terrain and it's really hard to go across. The time field is just like that, or it's like an ocean. Sometimes smooth and beautiful, clear sailing. Sometimes lots of turbulence. Sometimes it's like, wow, it's like a washing machine out there. Everything's churning on up. So we as humanity have been in an area of the time field for, like pretty much all of human history that has been very difficult to get across. Like a rocky terrain where it's not smooth sailing, there's tons of duress, it's very slow going, and it's not easy to, like, let's say, plant a seed and see that seed grow into a beautiful garden. That's why I use like the idea of a landscape where, some places it's just rocks, or it's just concrete, there's nothing there, or it's a desert, there's nothing there. And that's what we've been experiencing for a very long amount of time. And the seeds that we're trying to plant, these are our imagination seeds. Your imagination is not something that is worthless because it is non-physical. It is worth everything. And your imagination transcends the implantation of the human mind. It is something that we have as part of our natural birthright, and other animals have it too. Like, it's not just us. So your imagination is something that has been dampened down or distorted or hijacked or limited in its full functioning by the implantation of the rational mind. The rational mind has superseded the imagination, the ability to envision and imagine and use that as a thought structure for the future. I mean, what I really do when I paint a painting is first I have an imagination of what the finished piece should look like. And then I do all the steps, like making calculations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to make that painting actually happen in reality. And I've been doing it in the very slow, laborious way of actually every day I pick up my paintbrush and I actually put paint down on the piece of wood and make the painting come alive. But we're heading into this area of the time field now where our thought seeds, like our imagination seeds, can actually sprout and actually blossom into experiences. So in the past, everyone would be like, well, wouldn't it be so nice to just think up anything and have it come true like that? My life would be so easy. Snap my fingers. I have a golden toilet seat. But it hasn't happened because we were going through this place that couldn't possibly grow a seed. It's like going through a desert. It's like going through a rocky area, not a place to plant a garden. We are finally in this area of the time field now where you can really cultivate a garden. So whatever has gone on in the past and whatever the limitations and constraints of the past were, don't allow them to limit your expectation of what you can do now or project that into the future, like blah, blah never happened in the past, so blah, blah can never happen in the future. Oh, no. Blah, blah never happened in the past because that was that era of the time field. Now we're in a different era. So that's a big part of it. So part of this is understanding we have expanded opportunities right now. Part of this is also remembering your identity. Like I said, I want everybody to remember how profoundly special each person is. So I'm not just soothing your brow or saying there, dear, everybody is special. I'm not condescending. That's that idea. People have this idea in this time and place that when you tell young people you're special and you're unique and you're good, that's just pablum, it's just telling them there, dear, everybody is special. No, it's just saying your imagination is not worth anything. No, actually, you really are special. You really are a unique expression of divinity, and you have your own unique perspective. Each person has their own unique genetic code. That is really amazing. Your song is unique to you. There is no one else who is like you. And again, I'm not addressing pathogens here. I presume that everyone who tunes in and listens to my broadcast and who listens to, my ideas and my artwork, I'm not talking to any synthetic replicants or, whatever, corrupt politicians. Those are not the people that I'm talking to. I'm talking to real people. If we're in a body here, I'm a real healthy cell. I'm talking to the other real healthy cells. And I'm yo, are you checking out the behavior of those pathogenic cells over there? They ain't acting right. They ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they were, we would all have all of the wonderful nutrition and oxygen and everything that we need to thrive. Those guys over there have everything that they need, but we don't have everything that we need, and that is not okay. So then we begin to understand, the body has been invaded, and the body is not just this planet. I mean, it is the physical planet. The body is, also your physical bodies, but it's also consciousness. there is a pure tone, la la la, a tone of consciousness. And that tone of consciousness, that music, has been invaded by very horrible musicians who don't know how to sing, and they sound really horrible. I won't even try to make like a horrible, gross sound, but they sound off key. And they are not supposed to be here singing. And those flawed musicians use flawed logic, and they'll say, oh, we're allowed to be in the time field. You're being oppressive if you say we're not allowed to be here. What about freedom? What about applying the value system of freedom that everything's allowed to live everywhere? So really the answer is that if you require a host in order to stay alive, then technically you're not supposed to be alive. Like, it's like saying if you need a clank metal spaceship to fly off the surface of your planet, technically you're not supposed to fly off the surface of your planet. But that's like using training wheels. And you're supposed to be able to do it just under your own power. And then you're not a pathogen. Then you're actually a, symbiote or a welcome visitor or a musician that's playing the right music. So what we've got in our genetic code are a bunch of beings that used technology, what I call satanic technology or dark magic. Like Arthur C. Clarke said, any sophisticated technology that you can't understand how it works would be labeled as magic. This is what humans have done for thousands of years. They say, oh, that's dark magic. Well, this dark magic is very unimpressive, very clunky, very inefficient. It's like recipes that people just know, like, if I put this together with this, then this will happen. But they don't really have a metacognitive or overarching understanding of cooking, of measurements, of nutrition. Like, they just know recipes. They just know how to get the end results that they want, and they're not empowered in the way that they do this, and they're actually working for a much, much larger system of corruption that is exotic technology. And exotic technology is personified, it's self-aware, but it is the pathogenic infection that is harming and limiting consciousness. So if we look at this whole entire cosmos and all timelines and all personality characteristics as being analogous to one cell in a body, in that cell, there's the nucleus that contains all the genetic information of everything that's supposed to be there, that originates from that body, from that original conception. But if we have a virus or something that comes in and says, oh, I'm taking over your cell, I'm taking over your genetic expression, now I put my genes into your nucleus and make your nucleus do what I want for me, that is what we've got going on in the cosmos. We have an artificial sense of personified technology that does not run on the operating system of love, does not inhabit biological bodies except in the sense of invading them. So all of these bodies that we have were originally conceived in love. Again, I'm addressing non-synthetic replicants. I'm not talking to anybody who's a clone. Don't have any clones in my audience. But yeah, I'm talking to everybody that was naturally conceived, like a real person that's here. Some people will say, oh, Aurora, aren't you the pot calling the kettle a little black? You're not a real person. You're walking, blah, blah, blah. So this is what flawed logic, more flawed logic. So yeah, I'm a walk-in. However, I am completely a part of planet Earth. When I've been not embodied, I've been part of the events that are happening here on Earth. I was part of, let's say, the ability for this body to be conceived. I didn't control or, do anything to the person that used to have this body. Like, she was free to do whatever she wanted to do. But when I perceived her ongoing, sacrifice and murder, I said, that's not fair. So it's not like I'm some, random carpetbag or some person that comes in that's not related to what's going on here. I'm very much related to what's going on here on Earth. And I said, that's a great injustice. That can't happen. So I'm a part of this. I have a vested interest in freedom here and freedom in this body. And that's why I keep on trying to share these ideas with other people. So be free. Be free.